This video covers calendar creation, management, and usage. Each manuscript in Novel Goggles can have a story calendar. This calendar can be used to set and visualize scene dates and enables the chronological scene order traversal option in the traversal tools. You can create and edit the manuscript calendar and set scene dates in the planning context. Once set, scene dates will be shown in the following places: in the scene information panels in the planning context and writing context, in the scene information overlays in the scene-specific location data view, in the scene information overlays in the story arcs view, in the writing context, in the margin to the right of the manuscript. Let's take a look at calendar creation in the planning context. This is the planning context. Note the calendar section at the bottom of the display. Before you have created a calendar for a manuscript, the calendar creation fields will be displayed. Creating a calendar using the default configuration will allow you to set a title, epoch, or starting year, and duration in years. This will create a calendar using an approximation of the Gregorian calendar, but without leap years. Future updates will add leap years, and also the day of the week that any day falls on. When the custom calendar toggle is clicked, additional customization becomes possible. You can rename years, months, and days, change the number and names of months and the number of days in each month. As an example, using these options instead of the default years, months, and days, you might create a calendar using years, seasons, and sols, with the season set to summer, autumn, winter, and spring, and the number of days in each season set to 91. Let's create a default calendar with a duration of 3 years. Once you have created a calendar, the calendar creation fields will be replaced with a timeline showing the full duration of the calendar. Note that the timeline is divided into a few horizontal rows. This will become important when we set scene dates. Note also the buttons above the timeline. The Edit button allows you to edit the calendar parameters. The Minimize button allows you to minimize the timeline when you don't need it. The Recycle button. Many assets in Novel Goggles can be recycled if you no longer want to use them, but do not want to permanently delete them just yet. The small solid bin icon represents the Recycle command. To recycle an asset, left-click and hold the mouse button down on this icon. The icon will not immediately trigger the recycle operation. Note that the icon fills with red from the left to indicate that a recycle operation is imminent. The recycle operation should trigger after 2 seconds. Once the recycle operation is triggered, the asset recycle flag will be set and that asset will no longer show up in normal views. All asset data and links are untouched. To restore the asset or to permanently delete it, you will have to go to the asset management context, discussed later in the video. Due to the way that calendars are linked to the manuscript, you will not be able to restore a recycled calendar if you make another one in the same manuscript. You will still be able to view the recycled calendar in the asset management context. Scene dates will also remain set if you recycle or delete the calendar, although they will not be shown on the timeline until a valid calendar is available again. To set the date of a scene, click and drag the scene from the linear structure view over the timeline. Note that the timeline has expanded vertically, enlarging the horizontal rows mentioned before. Dragging the scene over the first row will show you the year that you are selecting. If you drag the scene further into the next row, you will note that the year hasn't changed. This is because the calendar duration is quite short. If you take a look at the extreme length calendar example later in the video, you will see where the extra row becomes useful. If you drop the scene here, the scene will be set to take place in the year that is displayed in the overlay. If you drag the scene further to hover over the third row, you will see that the month information is now overlaid on the timeline. Dragging the scene along this row will allow you to select a specific month. If you drop the scene here, the date will be set with a month and year. Finally, let's drag the scene further to hover over the last row. You will see days overlaid on the timeline. Dragging the scene along the row will allow you to set which day the scene takes place on. Dropping the scene here will set the date with a day, month, and year. Once you have set a scene date, the scene will be represented by a pink bar on the timeline. For scenes that have the full date set, a small bar will be displayed at the specific day. For scenes that simply indicate which month or year it takes place without specifying a day, the bar will be located at the start of the relevant month or year. If the active scene is changed, the scene date will be shown as an additional overlay on the timeline and the date and bar will pulse. The Novel Goggles calendar system has been developed to allow for broad expanses of time. This will allow you to easily space events out with large gaps in the timeline, for example, if there are events that take place in the distant past or future. To see how this works, let's edit the calendar to have a duration of a few thousand years. If you now drag a scene over the top row of the timeline, you will notice that you are selecting a range instead of a specific year. If you then drag the scene into the second row, you will be able to select a specific year in the range selected before. This makes it possible to handle these large expanses of time using a single display width. The rest of the timeline rows will behave the same as before, allowing you to set the full date. Once you have the dates for the scenes in your manuscript, you will be able to use the traversal tools to traverse the manuscript in chronological order. The traversal tools are available here, in the planning context, and in the writing context. Finally, let's take a look at calendar asset management. Calendar recycling and deletion work slightly differently to other assets. When a calendar is deleted, the dates set in scenes will not be removed. You will have to create a new calendar to change a scene's date. Restoring a calendar is also not possible once a new calendar has been created for a manuscript. Recycled calendars. Any calendars that have been recycled will be highlighted in orange. To manage a specific calendar, click on the ellipses button for that calendar. This is the Calendar Asset Management view. Here you can view a text-only representation of the asset data and its links to other assets. Calendars that have the recycled flag set will have a button to restore the calendar, which will simply unset the recycled flag and make the calendar available in normal views again. Clicking the download icon will download a backup file representing this asset. To delete a calendar permanently, click and hold on the bin icon with the X on it. This button works similarly to the Asset Recycle button and will not immediately trigger a delete operation. Instead, the button will start to fill with red from the left until the delete operation is triggered after 2 seconds. Delete operations are permanent, so be sure that you no longer require the asset before deleting it. That is all for this video. To learn about other Novel Goggles features, see the other videos available on our YouTube channel.